Good morning.
Good morning.
We can hear each other and see each other. It's a miracle.
It's fantastic.
It is. It's good to see you. How are you?
You too, Carolyn. It's special to see you. You
Aw,
know, we have known each other for a couple years and always in a significant relationship. There's things to learn, places to grow, honesty, authenticity, and honest communication. And it puts all of us into a stretch, and we've gone through a stretch, and it's great. It's a wonderful thing um, to build trust and to flex
absolutely.
and to be affected by what we learn from someone else. And so you and I have been doing that. So it's really special, and I appreciate it.
Oh, and I appreciate you. You know, as my father always said, you can find 5 good teachers in your lifetime. You're very, very lucky. Well, I've been lucky to find 6. And you make up for all those other 5 in many ways. And Daryl, too, has taught me that it's really important, either way, to be comfortable enough to be uncomfortable
Mm,
or uncomfortable enough to then be comfortable. And it just makes the relationship that much stronger.
hmm
You know what I mean? When that trust is there, it's not just a fly by night thing.
hmm
A lot of moving parts with respect and trust and kindness and care and all of that. So thank you so much, Dr. Rosensweet. It's very special to see you. And thank you for being here. And I know I speak for myself, but I also know I speak for all of the wonderful ladies who come up on our Facebook Lives. Yeah. So good morning,
Good
Kathy,
morning.
Facebook user, and to all the women who are going to be coming up. Always happy to have you. Special interview. And we're going to go ahead and get started. What do you think?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So I'm going to start out with this question because I think you're going to like this one. It comes from a lovely woman in Oklahoma. And she says, I know that Dr. Rosensweet says that he feels comfortable with women taking doses of 0.8 to 2.6 milligrams of bias, if I am understanding him correctly. If my own understanding of the math is correct, I feel I should be taking more of the bias due to my cognitive decline, and I am not feeling well at all. And I very much appreciate your thoughts on this.
Mhm. Well, this really speaks to the level of knowledge. I mean, to hear someone start to bring up numbers,
I know.
and in the world of bias, it's really remarkable, and it's a good thing. And
Right.
let me give a broad view of this first, and it is a woman's body loves these hormones, and a male's body loves our hormones. And not only that, we love the right amount. We don't like too much of anything. We don't like too little of anything. And we really need hormonal balance because they're doing a dance together. And to get that right, well, during your life, the body's so exquisitely designed to get that balance and the proper amounts right. But we can mess with that. Like, for example, not having really efficient and successful tools to deal with stress will then bring in the biology of the stress response, and these ovarian hormones will get thrown off. So even a young woman can have too much estrogen because estrogen functions as a great stress hormone. And so if you're calling on the need for increased fight or flight, you'll produce increased biochemicals, including you'll produce increased estrogen while you can. Or you'll throw your balance off because we need enough progesterone to balance the estrogen. So even in a young woman, you can get too much. You can also get too little. So there is an optimal amount for each individual woman, and it varies. And your questioner has mentioned a range there. She says 0.8 to 2.6. Well, I want to make a distinction here. That's a description of the amount of bias that you apply to your skin, that range. It's not a description of the amount of bias that's optimal in your body. That's a whole other different range. That range I've only seen defined excellently in 24-hour urine hormone testing.
Right.
And that I was part of that project, and that project included diving into the medical literature and see, well, what does the medical literature say about too much or too little? Let's go estrogen. Well, what's too much? Well, it's different than in a young woman. In a young woman, she has enough estrogen each month to cycle to produce an endometrial lining so she can bleed. And she's got enough estrogen to even start the process preparation for breastfeeding. Oh my God, and a woman knows this. A woman's breasts get fuller throughout a menstrual cycle. That's not just that part of that fullness is extra breast glandular cells. The cells that are there start undergoing cell division and thus multiplication. You're getting more cells once a month. That's how much estrogen a young woman needs and wants. Breast glandular cell proliferation. If you don't get pregnant, the process of getting prepared for lactation stops, and you get cell disappearance. And those new cells, they go bye-bye, and you start all over again once a month. Well, for a woman in menopause, with almost without exception, what too much looks like is too much estrogen that would actually continue that breast glandular cell proliferation. A woman in menopause does not need mitosis. She does not need cell division taking place in her breasts. She does not need extra. Why? Because that's a vulnerability. When genes are replicating and you're getting actual cell division, you're at a vulnerable part. And for example, you can get a mutation occur at that part and develop not a breast glandular cell, develop a cell that is a runaway cell,
Right.
a breast cancer cell. So we're not real interested in cell division in a woman in menopause. So the number, however, and then there's too little. We know from the medical literature that if a woman doesn't have a certain amount of estrogen, she is going to get bone loss. And if she does not have a sufficient amount of estrogen, she is going to get vaginal atrophy. And vaginal atrophy is part of a system that a woman winds up in adult diapers, because the bladder empties into the vagina. When that vagina thins out, the opening of that bladder, the urethral meatus, gets irritated. And that's when a woman can start getting incontinent. So we want, bottom line, every woman wants sufficient estrogen to protect that vaginal health or restore it if the atrophy's already occurred, and it will restore with proper estrogen levels. So the the amount
0.8. Yeah.
0.8 to 2.6 again is not telling us how much is in a woman's body. It's giving us a range of how much to apply to your skin or your mucous membranes to bring up what's in your body to optimal levels. And that's really what we're defining there. The other part of the vagina that really matters is having adequate muscle, because the uterus and the bladder is held up in the pelvis, cradled, held up by a very profound muscle called the levator ani. It's like a basket. And one of the things, when a woman loses her testosterone or a man loses his testosterone, you lose muscle. The process is called sarcopenia. You lose lower extremity muscle. It's how people wind up in canes, then walkers, then wheelchairs. Sarcopenia is the bane of the elderly, one of them. And you also lose the muscle that holds up the bladder and the uterus. And you get a droppage there, and that's the other part of how women get incontinent. So we want enough estrogen. And that estrogen is not defined by the 0.8 to 2.6 milligrams of estradiol equivalent, because that's the amount you apply to your skin, and it doesn't matter how much you apply to your skin. It matters how much makes it into your body.
Right.
And that's ultimately part of the power of the 24-hour urine hormone test, is we see how much actually made it into your body, and we know the ranges, we know the numbers, what's too little and what's too much. But I'm going back to the question, because there's a sophistication here that is really remarkable that I want to now go into. So I want to begin to answer her question. In the world of medicine, anyone who treats a woman in menopause is used to the hormone called estradiol. It was the main potent hormone that's produced out of the ovary. I say most potent. It is the most potent hormone. And when they originally started shifting out of pregnant mare urine into other forms, other more replicable or identical forms to what the ovary produce, because horse urine is, the estrogens are quite different. Premarin is quite different. 50% of them a woman's body has never seen. Only horses do. Well, for the developing of the birth control pill, they didn't want to use, I guess, horse urine estrogen. They needed an estrogen in it, and they chose, let's see if we can do some pure estradiol, or almost pure. They didn't choose totally pure. And they did. They were able to develop it and manufacture it. And they chose estradiol because that's the most potent of the estrogens in the ovary. And so in the world of medicine, any doctor for the last 30, 40 years is used to talking about estradiol. And for example, the pharmaceutical manufacturers went to doing their version of bioidenticals. It's about 20, 30 years behind. But they chose, when they're giving a woman estrogen, to just give them estradiol. That's what's in the patch, estradiol. What's in the oral estrogens that aren't horse urine derived, it's estradiol. And it's a good thing to compare the strength to estradiol, because that's the most documented. That's the one that's often tested in the blood, even though there's issues with blood testing when you're treating a woman. Estradiol is the standard of potency. Well, Biased has got two estrogens in there. It's got estradiol in there, the most potent estrogen, and it's got another estrogen in there called estriol, which is 1/8 as potent. It's only 1/8 as strong as estradiol. I'm so sorry. I've got a guest who's going to the airport, and I think that's who that is trying to reach me. I'm so sorry. I'll have to take this.
Okay.
If they call again. So sorry.
Okay.
Life happens too.
Yes, it does. And we'll all try to help that person get to the airport.
Thank you.
Collectively.
So, in actually understanding the potency of Biased, we've got to understand it's got two estrogens in there, and one of them is 1/8 as potent. Estradiol is in there. That's the most potent. So in developing mathematics to understand the potency of Biased, we arbitrarily assign estradiol the potency of 1. And then to do the math, we assign the potency of estriol to be 0.125, which happens to be the decimal version of 1/8. Why do we put the estriol in there? Why don't we use pure estradiol? Well, The ovary doesn't just produce estradiol. In fact, I'm going to have to take this. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Hello?
Hi, my name is Ray. I'm supposed to pick somebody up.
Yes, are you here?
I'm not sure.
Thank you, ladies, for your very kind patience. Sorry about this. I can sing. I can dance. Nah.
It's the solar panels, which is your key. Okay, great.
Strangest thing is that my cats aren't even around. Thank you. Thank you, Connie. Things happen. What are you going to do? It's life.
Okay, let's see if I see you coming.
But I got to tell you, it's really exciting to have all of you guys here. I have no idea where they are. Somewhere in North Carolina. And I'm in LA, so I'm totally clueless as to where they are. Please do know. And I have so many questions to get to. Oy vey. We'll get to them. We will.
Well, isn't that interesting? Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, we help them all. We help that person get to the airport or find your house or whatever it is.
Exactly. It's an airport shuttle.
Got it.
So the female ovary does not just produce estradiol. It produces 3 estrogens. And the estradiol, although it's the most potent one, it's not the most prevalent one.
Right.
Estriol is the most prevalent one coming out of the female ovary. In fact, there is more estriol than there is the sum of estradiol plus estrone. I'm not going to talk about estrone today, but it's another potent estrogen. It's about 8/10 as potent as the estradiol. Why would nature do that? Nature just didn't put estradiol coming out of the ovary. It put more estriol than the sum of estradiol and estrone. So the originator, beloved Jonathan Wright of Biest in the United States and the world, he's a medical doctor. He thought, why don't we just copy nature? Why do we want to invent some new biochemistry for a woman? At that time, we didn't even know why. He had one good reason, though. What he found in the medical literature was there was a medical doctor oncologist at the University of Nebraska. That's a cancer specialist. This is in the late 60s. Dr. Henry Lemon, who did some experimenting. He collected the urine for 24 hours of young, healthy women. And he was the one who discovered that young, healthy women had more estriol than they had the sum of estradiol and estrone. They had, in his discovery, the math was, the average was 1.3 times as much estriol as the sum of estradiol and estrone.
That's wild.
The other thing he did, and this was his real purpose, but remember he was an oncologist, a cancer doctor, he wondered if there was some kind of different estrogen pattern in women who had breast cancer. And he found that there was, that they were very low in estriol.
Blah.
That they had significantly less estriol than they had the sum of estradiol and estrone.
Wow.
That doesn't cause cancer. Cancer is very complex. There's a lot of moving parts to it. But it is one of the features. So one could make the case, why don't we just copy nature? So when we're talking about Biest, and I'm hunkering, I'm getting there.
Mhm.
We have to calculate to understand the potency of bias. We can't just go straight, and this is what's done out there. Like, it's very common in the gel world to prescribe a bias that's 2.5 milligrams per milliliter. So if a woman is taking a full milliliter, we know she's getting 2.5 milligrams of bias. But that's not enough information because we have to know the percentage of estradiol in that formulation and the percentage of estradiol. So one of the more common initial prescriptions is biased 80-20. The 80 refers to 80% estradiol, 20% estradiol. That's one of the most common. In fact, it was Dr. Wright's original recommendation. And the reason is that in many instances, if you gave a woman biased 80-20, you could replicate a young woman's healthy estrogen distribution in a 24-hour urine. So it took 80% bias to do it in many instances, not in all instances, but in many instances. That's the most common. It'll replicate something really healthy in a young woman's urine. So I don't know how deep to go, but to derive that 0.8, I'm going to give you an example, that 0.8 and 2.6. We, for example, prescribe biased in these organic oils. And we prescribe something that's 30 milligrams per milliliter. But there's 20 drops approximately per milliliter. And we're dispensing drops out of this. So if you divide 30 milligrams per milliliter by 20 drops per milliliter, you're going to wind up getting a certain number of milligrams of bias per drop.
Right.
However, what's in that drop is 80% estriol,
Yes.
20% estradiol. So when you really do the math, we wind up learning that one drop of 30 milligrams per milliliter 80-20 produces 0.44 milligrams of estradiol equivalent per drop. Equivalent to the potency of estradiol.
Right.
I'm leaving out some steps there. For those of you who really want to know, when I learn how to share my screen on Restream here, I'll show you the actual math. And I think I have the math in the book.
You do.
And at any rate, so a woman taking 2 drops, 1 drop in the morning and 1 drop in the evening of biased gets to 0.88. And in my practice, there's going to be a certain percentage of women that if they apply 0.88 milligrams of estradiol equivalent to their skin of bias, they're going to alleviate hot flashes and warm rushes. And yet, a lot of women are going to need more. In fact, some of them are going to need 2 drops in the morning and 3 drops in the evening, and that's going to give them 5 times 0.44. So it's going to get them up towards that 2.6. And most women in our practice are satisfied when they're taking somewhere between 0.8 milligrams of estradiol equivalent applied to their skin or all the way up to 2.6. That's
Right.
symptom alleviation.
Yes.
And when we test those women with that range, usually they show up with the proper amount in their bodies. And that's the thing that really matters. Is there enough estradiol equivalent in their urine so that they protect their vagina and protect their bones? Because that much we know from the medical literature. And there's not too much that they're producing breast glandular cell proliferation, which you can often tell by breast tenderness, which were no breast.
Right. Right. And so she's saying, well, I feel I should be taking more because of my cognitive decline and I'm not feeling well at all. And so it's kind of like a lot of moving parts and math.
Yes, and that's very significant because we list, and you've posted, and it's in the book, symptoms of insufficient estrogen. 75% of women who have insufficient estrogen will have symptoms. And if she's not feeling well and she's got cognitive issues, high likelihood she doesn't have enough estrogen. So we can do the math if she's on hormones and tell her how much she's actually on. And I do this all the time with new patients. We encounter a lot of women who actually are being treated with estrogen, and it's remarkable to me when I do the math, even when they're unbiased, and that's a very sophisticated knowledge when they're unbiased and not pure estradiol.
Right.
They're on insufficient. Like, for example, I was interviewing a new patient 2 days ago, and she was on estradiol. She was on bias for a long time. And what she was given was 0.39 milligrams of estradiol equivalent on a cream. And that's half of the very bottom edge of what women are. So it's very common for it to have insufficient dosage. Well, a woman could say to me, well, I must have been on sufficient doses, different from the questioner. My hot flashes went away. Yeah, well, we tested, and I reported to in a large teaching seminar, and I reported this. I did 24-hour urine hormone tests on 54 women in my practice who I put on hormones, and they said, wow, thank you, I feel better. And and it turned out that 50% of those women did not have enough estrogen to protect their vagina and bones. And 25% of them had too much estrogen to put their breasts at risk for breast glandular cell proliferation. Only 25% of them who felt better were actually in the green zone, the excellent zone. Now I'm getting closer to answering one of the major questions that your questioner had, because she mentioned the word cognition, and challenged cognitive ability in a menopausal woman is classic. I don't know what percentage of women over the years, because I didn't keep track of it, actually seek treatment for menopause because of the big three: cognitive decline, weight gain, and sleep and mood disturbance. Cognitive decline's way up there. If I had to make a wild guess, somewhere between 50 and 70% of women who go into menopause feel some form of their brains not functioning properly. The interesting thing, and most of them will get that brain back by producing a 24-hour urine in that green zone of 8 to 14 micrograms of the sum of estrone and estradiol. So get the rest of the symptoms alleviated, and most women are going to get satisfactory return of cognitive function. Not all. Because the medical literature tells us, though it takes this amount to get the brain functioning, this amount to protect the bones in the vagina, somewhere in there, it takes this amount. There are some women that actually need quite a bit more estrogen. Quite a bit more.
So this is where you say that you never say never.
Yeah, because our inclination is not to increase the estrogen beyond the optimal zone and push it into the possibility of breast glandular cell proliferation. Yet that is insufficient to protect all women. So I want to tell you a story again that I've told before here. I'm invited to Washington, D.C. to speak in front of the National Academy of Science Committee on the safety and efficacy of bioidentical hormones, and I've done research on the other doctors that are going to testify on that day. And I learned that one of these doctors is on a protocol that brings the period back. And I know what it takes to sustain a period or bring it back, because I've tested women who are on this particular approach to menopause. And what it takes in a menopausal age woman is somewhere between 3 and 8 times the upper limit of normal, not the average of a young 20-year-old, 25-year-old. 3 times the upper limit of normal, 3 to 8 times to sustain. So, for example, it's common at a certain phase of treatment that a woman will even be as high as 2.6 milligrams of estradiol equivalent in our practice. Well, what it takes to sustain a period often averages in at 16 milligrams of estradiol equivalent. That's just what you apply to your skin. What they're going to test out at is somewhere between 3 and 8 times the upper limit of normal. So I'm sitting down, and as this doctor, she's 65, is sitting down next to me. She's very friendly. She smiles, introduces herself. I introduce myself. We're just coming off of coffee break. I'm already seated. She's sitting down. We got a couple minutes before this next phase of the committee starts up, in which we're presenting. And I say to her, "Are you going to reveal to this committee that you're on that your period, that you're on the dosages that you're on?" And she winks her eye and says no, because she knows that they're on alert for this, and they consider this to be not okay to have these humongously high dosages. So she knows it, and her testimony was something that didn't even mention. And then she and I and her son went out to lunch. And this is the story she told me. I was 55. I was starting to I'm a medical doctor. I'm in my practice every day. And I'm starting to have cognitive issues. And they're getting worse. And I'm reaching a point where I'm going, I don't know if I can continue to practice medicine.
That's very scary.
So blunged in the cap. I'm getting so verblunged in the capilla here. Freely translated, I'm losing my marbles.
I didn't want to say.
You probably could give us the correct translation. Verblunged in the capilla couldn't be accurate.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll just spell it out.
And she said, and I already know my mother, she's telling me, my mother has dementia, full-blown dementia. And my mother's sister, my aunt, has full-blown dementia. And I'm starting to get cognitive decline, and I'm 55 years old. And I'm staring down the barrel of that, and it really scared me. But I knew there was a relationship of estrogen to cognition. And I started taking the estrogen, and I started to clear up a little bit. So I started to take a little more. I started to clear up even more, and I started to take a little more, and I started to clear up any more. And by the time I had cleared up, and here I am, I'm sitting there, she's 65 years old. She's as clear as a bell. She's as brilliant and cognitive as anyone I'd ever met up with. I never would have guessed that there was cognitive challenge there. She said, by the time I started clearing up entirely, I was also having a period again. I hadn't had a period in years.
That's 65.
Well, this occurred when she was in her mid-50s, but she's still having a period when she's in 65. So I know that it takes 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal of a young woman to sustain a period at the age of 65 by my own testing of women who were on that particular approach to things. And it was so moving to sit there with a human being and hear that her brain function returned. And what's my point? Although our goal doesn't take that much in a menopausal woman. If you protect the bones and you protect the vagina, and it doesn't take that much. It takes between 8 and 14 micrograms on a test to do that. And then if you go above 14, you're putting a woman's risk for breast glandular cell proliferation, which people have written about that they're against in the traditional community, and I am as well. You never say never. And this woman, it took this robust a dose which is, that much, 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal of a 25-year-old. So I know it's a long question. So your questioner said, is a long answer. Your questioner said, but I'm not, Mike, I'm still having cognitive challenge. Well, in the menopause method, we would not stop. We would try and see if we could eliminate that cognitive challenge to where you're going, I'm clear, I'm great. Now, there are other possibilities for decline of cognitive function. And there's a book right on my shelves back there, written by Dr. Dale Bredesen, who is one of the world's expert on dementia, including Alzheimer's. And he lists something like 36 possible factors that you want to consider when someone has dementia. And he definitely mentions hormones as one of them. However, so many women are going to clear up with adequate estrogen or even robust estrogen, even to the point of getting the period back. We really will check how much does it take. Will estrogen do it? It's not going to do it in all cases, but we're going to find out. So no matter what your numbers are, and when I hear someone report somewhere between 0.8 and 2.6 milligrams, what I don't know is, has the math been proper? Because to arrive at what 0.8 to 2.6, the range that I'm describing, you have had to done that correction for the 1/8 potency of estriol, or it's going to not look right. So that math must be done to see if you're in the ballpark of 0.8 to 2.6 milligrams of estradiol equivalent applied. If you take it straight, you're going to get an inflated view of the estrogen potency in there. I don't know if you follow that, but I have to have a chalkboard or something to demonstrate this to you. But very often someone will say, well, I'm on I'm on 1.2 milligrams of bias. That's within your range. I go, oh, wait a minute here. That could be highly inflated. If you're not doing that correction, that estriol is 1/8 as potent, you may not be on enough at all. I got to know whether they've done that math. And in almost every instance, they have not done that math. So they're giving an inflated view. They say, well, I'm on 1.6 milligrams of biased. Yeah. If you didn't take into account that the estriol was 80% of what's in there, and yet 1/8 is potent, then you've got an inflated number, and you're going to run low even on the math. But we don't care that much about a math. When women have cognitive decline, we're going to push that estrogen to see if we can eliminate that cognitive decline. Because even if you go into getting your period back and you're on 3 to 8 times the upper limit of normal, we can always do what we always do anyway, which is we monitor the breast. We don't care about breast glandular cell proliferation. We do care that mitosis that has a genetic mutation in it occurs. Well, if we monitor you, we're going to high likelihood with proper mammograms. Oh, may I repeat mammograms? Oh, may I repeat mammograms? You cannot, NOT, rely on thermograms to screen for cancer. You'll get false negatives.
Right, and people get that in reverse, yeah.
You'll get false negatives. How do I know that? Because I got false negatives. These women actually had cancer. But you miss very few of them on mammogram. Now, we're requesting breast thermograms frequently in our patients. because it reveals whether there's increased heat, thus inflammation in a breast. This is very important for breast health. But we never, as in never, and I'm not taking the time to tell you the whole story, but we never use breast thermography, as wonderful tool it is, for cancer screening. And I'm emphasizing this because I don't want you to rest for a minute if you think that you're screened and safe because you had a normal thermogram.
I don't think I've ever had one, actually.
Yeah. So at any rate, the questioner asks, is that 0.8 to 2.6? I'm in that range. I don't know if she's in that range or not, because I wanted to go on that long description of, well, wait a minute, she could be not doing the math properly and she'd have some inflated number of what she actually has. But again, it doesn't matter. If you're still having cognitive decline, we're gonna keep raising that estrogen to see if we can get rid of it. And then we just monitor your breast health. That's all it takes.
You know, we spent the better part of this hour answering that question, and I think that it really made a lot of sense to a lot of women, because it can be incredibly confusing. Very quickly for me, I just thought it was a one size fits all. You give 70-30 and go on your way and have a good life. That's what I thought.
70-30 totally changes the milligrams of estrogen.
No, I get it. I know. I'm just throwing out, 80-20, 70-30, 50-50. But I didn't know about those. I just thought 70-30 was it, and
right.
Have a nice life.
So there's some detail, and anyone in this audience can totally understand it should you want to, but it brings up the need that is the primary need, is to link up with a prescriber, because ultimately someone's going to have to write that prescription. And it does matter that they know what they're doing.
Yes.
And yes, indeed, 5 drops of Bias, 30 milligrams per milliliter, 80-20 in the menopause method orifice reducer, because it not only matters the size of that thing right there, that hole. And we have done extensive studies. So if it's menopause method, certified organic oils as your base, and and it's dispensed by one of the 30 pharmacies in the United States that do that, yes, to the questioner, that 5 drops will deliver about 2.5 milligrams of estradiol equivalent.
Thank you. Thank you.
Woo! Phew!
Yeah, maybe we can repeat that again.
Really?
If anybody wants really to get into this, and I gotta tell you, you can, and it is downloadable free, or from that seller in the sky, Happy Healthy Hormones. Read it. Great book. Thank you, Dr. Rosensweet, for writing it. Thank you for the wonderful people who edited it. Sherry. That's right. Love to talk to her in forever. Love to you, Sherry. A question came up. I had sent it to you. I'm going to ask it because I believe that you're okay with it, because you didn't write me back saying no. And this woman is saying, Levon, you're welcome. I'm 44 years old, 2 years into menopause. Grandmother had ovarian cancer. Aunt had breast cancer. Another woman wrote that she's 55 years old, BRCA negative, kind of like the same question. Both of these women are wondering if they are candidates for compounded bioidentical hormones. They are seeing doctors. The doctors are not giving them you know the story, it ain't working. So they're frightened, and they're wondering if you could shed some light on whether you feel that they are candidates for hormone therapy.
I'm so glad that you asked a simple question that will only take me 30 seconds to answer. Not.
I got this watch here.
I'd like to add the word not. But
Yeah.
what I can answer today, because this is so important. I mean, this is really the bottom line. The bottom line in menopause medicine is don't put a woman at risk for cancer.
Right.
So, in general, when you look at any individual who's had any type of cancer or any type of serious illness, especially life-threatening ones, the way I've come to understand it, and I've been a holistic doc out of the gate, so we're talking 1968 till now, that what it's come down to for me is that our natural propensity is health. Our genetics is health. We're designed to be healthy and to live a long and prosperous life. Well, in order to not have that happen, we have to have a series of adversities. Things that punch at our body, hurt our body,
Yeah.
even if it's only a few molecules. So the way I always like to have people picture it is the way I picture it is, let's pretend that on the wall behind me, I put up a video. And in that video, one second, I put up a video, and it's a video of someone's whole life. Someone got videoed from the time they were conceived up until this very day. And that the editor of that video had a magic button, and they could press that button, and it would edit out all the good stuff, all the good food, all the good exercise, all the cleanliness and not exposure to toxicity, all the fun, all the love, all the happiness, all the joy and miracle of being human. Edit it out. What would be left behind is the footage of things that were health adverse and provocative of distortions in the human body and challenging to the human body. And what we would find is violations of healthy eating. And you can imagine, many of you know how many violations of healthy eating you've done in your life. Maybe you keep a little counter. And from the time you were 6 and you could press the button, you've counted the times you swerved from a healthy eating diet.
Those Rice Krispie treats.
Those Rice Krispies. Snap, crackle, and pop.
Right.
And how many times you had exposure to environmental chemicals that were poisonous. Like we put on these herbicides and pesticides that's been put into our food. Well, try and imagine how strong a chemical has to be able to kill an insect. How strong does that chemical have to be? Very strong. And we're just loaded with it. So toxicity, not to mention the other sources of toxicity. Or all the times that you didn't do enough exercise in a day. Or you did too much and you strained yourself just because you thought it was good to push yourself. Or how many times you went into a stressful situation. I'm going to make a blanket statement. Human life is loaded with stress, and the stress is to our benefit.
Oddly.
But that's not what gives you trouble. It's not the stress. It's how you respond or react to stress. If you're not doing the right response to stress, you're going to trigger a special biology called the biology of fight or flight. And it is ultimately wears us down as much as anything that exists.
So quickly, just to say, I heard something that life is 90% of what it is. What is it that happens to you, and 10% as to how it is you react to it? or
or
vice versa.
vice versa, probably.
Yeah, vice versa.
It doesn't matter what the challenge is, but it does matter how you respond to it. And one of the things you want to do is you don't want to go ballistic. You don't want to go off the rails. You don't want to go mashuga because you're stressed. You want to be successful and wise and sober and sane and equanimous. In order to do that, sometimes there's some body of knowledge and information and tools you need to acquire around your own emotions and your own consciousness and your own conscious awareness. Well, that's the elephant in the room, because it's in my understanding of myself and most human beings, there's the problem. There stink the gas. It's an inappropriate response to stress, triggering the biology. So if what we would see in that video is all those times, and there'd be thousands of them. And this is what gets the human body ill, is all these blasts of adversity, whether it's toxicity or inappropriate nutrition, not breathing enough. That's within the realm of nutrition. Not enough oxygen, which is notorious. People are underbreathers for reasons. Chemical exposure, all kinds of poisonous exposures. And the elephant in the room is an inappropriate response to stress, an excessive one that triggers the biology of the stress response, which, for example, suppresses the immune system. How do cancer cells? Well, cancer cells are occurring in us all the time. But a good, healthy immune system goes, wait a minute here. You're going to live not in my body.
Gobble, gobble.
My body.
Yeah.
What suppresses the immune system? Well, it's all in that story. And then there's something I haven't mentioned. There's mysterious causes. You're going to hear stories of people who died, and you will not be able to explain, or I can't explain with common means, why in the world did that person get ill?
Babies.
Adults, babies, I'm glad you mentioned it, young kids, and adults, and at any age. Why in the world did they get ill? They had a good life. They were very caring. They were very devoted. They contributed so much. So there's the unexplainable. But now, taking all that into account, when you're looking at a person with cancer, an illness often sufficient to, cause us to leave the planet Earth, you're talking about strong stuff there. How'd they get the cancer? And what affects the cancer? Well, let's talk about how hormones affect the cancer. So anyone, and this questioner, I highly recommend, and I know you do too, Carolyn, that they read this book that's over my shoulder called Estrogen Matters by Avram Blooming and Carol Tavris.
Big time.
Pardon?
Big time, please.
Big time.
Yeah.
Because it is the science. That's what these two have done. Dr. Blooming is an oncologist, a specialist in cancer. They laid down what the actual science is. And the actual science is this. Women who have been treated with hormones, and in this case, what they're summarizing is women who are treated with Premarin and Prempro, pregnant mare urine-derived estrogens, plus a molecule called medroxyprogesterone acetate, which is it's a progestin. It's not even progesterone. It's a provocative molecule, as Dr. Phyllis Bronson has described. The problems with progestins, and so have many others. Even when you're treated with Premarin or Prempro, you have less of a risk of developing breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than if you are not treated with hormones. That's the facts.
Right.
That's the medical science. Oh, you can say, well, what about estrogen receptor site positive? That's so great. We still can't figure that out. But what we can say is that women who are treated with, and really we're talking about Premarin and Prempro, we're not talking about bioidenticals. The European literature goes into bioidenticals and says they're less risk. Women who are treated with hormones are at less risk for breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke than women who go untreated. Women who have had cancer, breast cancer, and have had the breast cancer properly treated, you know this information so well that I can tell, Carolyn Shapiro, that you want me to, okay, don't forget this, keep it going. I can read you like a book. Women who have had breast cancer and have had that breast cancer properly treated, they're at an increased risk of recurrence of that breast cancer than a woman who's never had cancer is at risk for getting cancer. However, these women who've had breast cancer are at less risk for recurrence if they're treated with Premin or Prempro than if they go untreated. Less risk of recurrence. Treated with hormones, less risk of recurrence. And to get to the point of this questioner, women who have the BRCA mutation are at 4 times risk for developing breast cancer than a woman who is any other woman who does not have that mutation. They're at less risk of developing breast cancer if they're treated with hormones than if they're not. And for those of you who are at risk, Carolyn and I strongly recommend that you read that book, Estrogen Matters, because this is covered in depth there. And it's not just people offering an opinion. It's people going into the scientific literature and exploring this topic. Yeah.
Deeply.
Not that the science is the final answer, because there, like I say, there's the mystery in health and illness. But this is the best information we have.
That is true.
Everything in life, every decision we make or don't make has risks and benefits. Every significant decision that we make has risks and benefits associated with it. And so every case is individual. And should your intuition or your exploration or your advice come down to, I don't care what the medical literature is, I don't feel comfortable taking hormones, there will be another pathway to health. Because what I assert with every single given individual woman, no matter what your situation is, no matter how many moving parts you're dealing with, there is the truth for you. When you put everything together, you don't put off the decision endlessly, because right now, even if you haven't investigated it, the truth exists for what's most beneficial for you. And in the questioner's mind, the truth exists right now. It's yours to discover it, whether hormones are beneficial for you or whether hormones are a challenge. It doesn't matter what the science is. The truth exists for you. And that's your job as an individual woman. And you got to really watch out for other people's opinions. Because if you go out and seeking, you're going to still meet up with widespread terror from women, from men, from healthcare professionals about treating with hormones. Because most of the people who have this widespread fear are absolutely unaware of the science. They had the one scare from the Women's Health Initiative in 2002, which was false. That Women's Health Initiative Study Committee retracted their 2002 statement in 2016, I think it was, or 17, published in the same journal. After 18 years of follow-up, there is no increased risk of breast cancer, heart attack, and stroke. Yeah, how many people have heard that? No, you go out to get advice from to someone who's not an expert at this, and you're going to get your tochas terrified. TT. It's a diagnosis. It's a
medical diagnosis.
It's a medical diagnosis. Terrified tuchus. Look it up.
Terrified tuchus.
Look it up.
That is, in other words, your end, ladies.
Don't take our word for it.
No. But that being terrified could not be such a good thing.
And that's why we ask all of our patients, don't stop until you know in your heart and guts, as best as you can, we're not perfect, what the right current choice is. Should you make the choice to treat with hormones, well, any decent hormone program, for example, ours in the menopause method, we're going to monitor you like we do everyone, and we'll monitor you more closely because there's wonderful breast monitoring techniques. It's never been more sophisticated. And they're gifts from God. God got us all that is. These monitoring techniques are so valuable, and you just got to know how to do it. Well, someone who takes this on as a specialty knows how to monitor the health of the breasts, and that's what you do, and knows things about breast health too, and knows how to administer estriol for breast health. Something I didn't mention to the previous question. That estriol is protective, and it's into the estrogen receptor sites and estrogen receptor site beta and deproliferation. You know how to put together a program that emphasizes breast health is the bottom line.
Right. And, our lovely, lovely Dr. Berkson came up and she said she had breast cancer. She's been on BHRT for 23 years. And,
Yes.
yeah.
And others. And just as an aside, Dr. Berkson is interviewing me on, I think it's this Thursday.
It is.
It's this Thursday at 1:00, something like that, Eastern Standard Time. What fun that will be! And would we post that link again?
I did last week. I've spoken with Dr. Berkson and her staff, and yes, thank you, Dr. Berkson. Thank you. Thank you. So we can.
So with anything, it's like we don't go into this blind. And we have wonderful monitoring tools, and there's wonderful treatments. You catch a breast cancer early, the cure rate's way up there. 98%, 99% is way up there.
Thank you.
Yes, who in the heck likes to have to go down a process like that? But it's like anything else. When you're really paying a lot of attention, good things can be done, and we can make sure and monitor for breast health. And if there's increased breast density, there's things that can be done to reduce your risk. And there's breast hygiene measures that are really, really important. They're in the book. So I know it's a complexity to it, but here's your job. It all comes down to the same thing. You got one job if you're watching this. You want to find someone who's decided to specialize in treating women in menopause with compounded bioidentical hormones. That's your job. You want to find someone who cares so much about it that this is what they're taking on as their main thing, and that you like them and you trust them.
And for me, I took those two books, Happy, Healthy Hormones and Estrogen Matters, to many of these doctors whom I had seen. And they looked at me like I was out of my mind. They were like, "You want me to read these?" I was like,
Well, they're so often so busy and so into what they've got going on that's very common, of course. That's why your job is not necessarily, I'm glad you brought that up, because so many women approach their beloved, trusted physicians and they want them to take on a new specialty because they really like them and trust them, but they're scrambling. Most of them, can they keep up with what they already have going on for themselves?
Right. Hence them looking at me like, they're like, "You want me to read these?" I was like, They're like,
"No, you want, your job is to go and seek out someone who really has taken this on."
Exactly.
Specializing in.
Exactly.
Your doctor can't do that.
No.
You should see some of these folks when they come home at the end of their day.
It ends at 10 at night after that last phone call.
Yeah. Hand them a book that's outside there.
Right. That was a mistake on my part. I just thought every doctor on the planet knew how to treat menopause. It didn't occur to me that they wouldn't.
And you're not, of course, the only one. I mean, for good reason, women want to reach out to their trusted healthcare providers and do so by the thousands and thousands and thousands every day. But unfortunately, they can't do that. And a lot of them have really been injured by the false information of that Women's Health Initiative.
And they're
that injury went deep, and they're not familiar with the retraction. So anyway, wow, you don't think we went over our appointed.
The anointed, appointed, allotted time. But you know what? It was really a wonderful interview because you touched on so many things. And I've got these questions right here. They're not going anywhere. And I have a few questions that have come up that we can happily ask. But I will keep these, and we can get to them on Thursday. Thank you, Dr. Berkson, for posting that link. That is so, from my heart to yours, appreciated in a big way. Dr. Rosensweet, you're appreciated in a big way, as you well know.
As are you, Carolyn Shapiro.
And
in behalf of both of us, we want you to look up that medical diagnosis called TT.
Well, the tuchus part, at least.
Terrified tuchus.
The terrified tuchus. I don't know if you can Google that, but maybe you can. I don't know.
For sure, Google will have picked up on that one.
Yes. That's hilarious. So, I wish you an amazing day. We will be back on Thursday. And thank you to all the women that came up. And look for that link, because that's going to be a really great interview. Dr. Berkson interviewing Dr. David Rosensweet. My.
Well, it won't really be an interview. We're just going to bat it around for an hour, I'm sure.
As you guys can well do.
When Devaki and I just start yakking, it's a conversation.
It's wonderful, and something that we would love. TT and Meshuggah, that's funny. She just put up. So happy day. Lots of love.
Good to see you. And until Thursday.
You got it. Have a fabulous one, everybody. Bye.
Bye-bye.